Good evening, everyone. All right. Make sure my audio, I think, is working. Good evening. There we go. Good evening, everyone. We are excited to get started. Thank you all for bearing with us as we had a little folks in traffic and wanted to make sure everyone was here. Today is our interview schedule. We're excited to hear from our applicants who have applied for the District 3 vacancy seat that we have on the school board. We have our applicants will go in order, alphabetical order. We have submitted, they received some questions that they're going to ask tonight, and I'll just read them so that the public also has an opportunity to know what you're going to be responding to. The Board of Education has two primary charges: to set the policies for Durham Public Schools and to hire, hold accountable, and evaluate the chief administrator, the superintendent of DPS. Being prepared for both aspects of this role is important. As such, describe the three most important metrics to you in evaluating the performance of the superintendent and by proxy, their staff. Secondly, Durham Public Schools has a commitment and a focus on equity. What are some of the greatest inequities you observe in our public schools, and how will you use your seat on the board to address them? Number three, school board members represent our community. Many nonprofits, organizations, parents, and teacher associations petition the board on behalf of their stakeholders. How will you ensure the voices of those from marginalized communities are heard? How would you work to dismantle the barriers to collecting input from communities who have been marginalized? And last, schools in Durham must be safe and inclusive. Describe what school safety means to you and what policies you support in order to keep our schools safe. So you all will have 10 minutes to respond to those questions, as well as we have an opportunity to hear your thoughts on a couple of topics that we have put together: student boundary planning for secondary schools, educator recruitment and retention, public school funding, student workforce development, and supporting our LGBTQIA+ students and educators. So thank you all for your work, for preparing for today. We're excited to hear from you. I also want to make a note that one of our board members, Vice Chair Emily Chavez, is joining us virtually. Ms. Chavez, do you want to say hello?
Yes, hi everybody, good evening. Thank you so much for being here, and look forward to seeing the presentations online. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, the board will hear from you all applicants, but we won't be asking questions tonight. We do have your contact information. If we have follow-up questions, we'll reach out. So, we ready? All right, we'll start with Jessica Carter Alton.
Good evening, Board Chair Umstead, Vice Chair Chavez, and esteemed members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening and request your support for the Board of Education District 3 vacancy. My name is Jessica Carter Otten. I'm the mother of 3 children, 2 that attend Lakewood Elementary and 1 headed to Durham Pre-K in the fall. I'm also a qualitative public health researcher at UNC with a current focus on the intersection of incarceration and health. Among the most important responsibilities of the Board of Education is evaluating the performance of the superintendent and by proxy their staff. From my perspective, the following are the most critical indicators of success. 1, each year I want to see significant progress towards closing the opportunity gap across all student demographics and subgroups. Performance and disciplinary data should be disaggregated and analyzed to ensure that we are putting our attention on the needs of all students and dedicating additional resources to those that need them most. 2, each year, I want to see that we are retaining more educators and recruiting more Black and Latinx teachers. When educators have what they need to excel, they stick around, become even more skilled, and our children benefit. Children also benefit from having teachers who look like them and with whom they have a shared culture and or social experience. 3, each year, I want to see that we have more Durham families choosing DPS. The fact is, families of Durham have a wide range of choices when it comes to educating their children, and many are opting out of our public school system. We need to continue to give families a reason to choose DPS. And we have a responsibility to each family that does choose our schools to ensure that they are safe and nurturing, and that our curriculum is challenging, culturally responsive, and fosters critical thinking. The second topic I'm discussing this evening is what I believe to be the greatest inequities in DPS and how I will use my board seat to address them. Current board members and administration have shown incredible dedication and leadership in pursuing equity-based policies, yet inequities persist in academic performance, graduation rates, and disciplinary action by race, economic status, English language proficiency, and disability status across our schools. While these reflect larger societal challenges, some inequities are exacerbated by district-level policies that influence our disparate outcomes and which we can change. For example, our current magnet system requires caregivers to know how to navigate all of their options and the application system. This, coupled with the priority and walk zones, have resulted in some schools that are wealthier and not demographically representative of our district. These magnet schools then receive more funding than base schools to support their programming, and when added to the wealth brought by families, are an example of inequitable distribution of and access to resources in DPS. The Growing Together plan takes significant steps to address these and similar inequities related to school boundaries and the magnet system. Our board can continue this work as we implement the plan by advocating that all schools, not just the magnet programs, have the resources they need to be amazing educational facilities where families are eager to send their children to learn. In my work on the board, I will also use data released by the DPS Office of Equity Affairs to support implementation of the district's racial and educational equity policy and strategic plan, and work with colleagues on the board to make decisions about adjustments to the plan as needed to better support students based on the data. Restorative disciplinary practices are a key equity-based practice that I support based on the existing evidence and my experience working with justice-involved individuals. As we expand restorative justice in DPS, my focus will be on making sure that we are implementing these practices with fidelity to make them as effective as possible. I also want our disciplinary data to show that these practices are working to both reduce suspensions and decrease disparities. And I want to hear directly from students and staff about how things are working so that we know whether and how to make adjustments. The third topic I will discuss is how I will ensure that the voices of those from marginalized communities are heard. Those most impacted by inequities are the voices that we need to hear if we want to solve our district's most challenging problems. As a board member, I want input from all stakeholders, but I'm committed to spending extra time and energy finding and listening to those that might not be the loudest or the most powerful, but who have concerns or ideas to share. This approach is not new to me. In my public health work and work organizing parents and other caregivers at Lakewood Elementary, I've learned how to dismantle barriers to collecting input, and I plan to apply these experiences to my work on the board. Doing this well means meeting people where they're at. I will attend gatherings at schools and events in the community on a regular basis, and while at these events, take the time to listen, to learn, and to build authentic relationships with families across District 3, as I have at Lakewood. I speak Spanish, which means I'm able to connect with more of our DPS families, and I'm dedicated to always offering parents ways to reach me that meet their specific communication needs and preferences. School staff tend to know their families well, so I also plan to spend time building relationships with staff, both to hear from them and to connect with parents in the schools. At Lakewood, we're fortunate to have our community school staff connecting families with one another and gathering input. But in schools that do not have this resource, I would reach out to staff who can identify families that are willing to share their perspectives. I will also seek out community groups that represent Black and Latinx families like We Are, Village of Wisdom, El Centro Hispano, Durham Can, and others, and work to build relationships with them to create systems of open two-way communication. These groups are typically familiar with the concerns of their community members, and as such, I want to hear their perspectives and will make sure that they know I'm available to listen and to learn from them. The fourth topic I'll discuss is school safety, both what it means to me and what policies I support to keep our schools safe. In the field of public health, we say that health is more than just the absence of disease. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Similarly, safe schools are more than schools in which our children are free from harm. They're schools that actively work to support the emotional, social, and physical well-being of our children. DPS has already established a number of policies in line with this mission, including the policy prohibiting discrimination, harassment, and bullying, the new LGBTQIA+ and gender supports policy, and so many more. As a board member, I'll support these and other existing policies that promote the full well-being of our children. I will advocate for the continued investment in social and emotional learning in our elementary schools and expansion into our middle and high schools. I will also advocate to expand mental health services in DPS schools through co-located mental health centers and additional counselors and social workers. We're currently at a counselor to student ratio of 1 to 313, which, while close to the recommended ratio of 1 to 250, is insufficient given the current mental health crisis that our children are experiencing. Through social and emotional learning and mental health support, I believe that we can provide Durham children with the tools they need to recognize their shared humanity and to respect and to celebrate their differences. In doing this, we build their capacity to empathize with one another and their ability to be in community with each other. I take our responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of our students and staff very seriously. No one wants to send their child to a school in which they feel unsafe, and educators do not want to teach where they fear for their safety. But we also need to walk a very careful line here to make sure that we are not causing more harm by taking a fear-driven approach that creates only an illusion of security, is not based on evidence, and might not be what our families or our educators want. When considering school safety measures, my approach will be to make data-driven decisions about how likely it is that the safety benefits of a specific intervention will outweigh the potential harms, such as increased disciplinary actions against students of color, unnecessary costs, or unjust breaches of privacy. And when I refer to data, I'm talking about the scientific literature and quantitative measures here in Durham, but also about data gathered via conversations with a wide variety of people that these decisions impact, including educators, caregivers, and students. I appreciate your time and consideration this evening. I've applied for this seat because I care deeply about public education and believe that it is the foundation of a healthy democratic society. I also believe that all children deserve a high-quality education regardless of their race, background, or zip code. I believe in a collaborative approach and would be honored to work with each and every one of you if I'm selected to serve on this board.
Stop you right there. That's strong. All right, I'm going to stop you right there. Thank you. The next part of this, you'll have an opportunity to share 2 minutes about something you are passionate about. And then we also have our bowl here with additional topics that we'll be able to draw from and also hear your thoughts on. So which topic did you choose?
I chose student boundary planning.
All right, we'll
May I
start
get a
with, yes. We'll start there and then we'll pick a topic out of it.
In developing the secondary Growing Together plan, DPS should use a similar approach and set of criteria that it used to formulate the current plan for elementary schools. I will advocate that all boundaries, including application school boundaries, are drawn to promote socioeconomic diversity and that there's equity and access to the magnet programs. I will also work to ensure that all schools have what they need to be truly excellent educational spaces. In the development of this plan, the administration should apply lessons learned from the initial process. We can do an even better job of informing DPS families about proposed changes and the reasons for these changes, and improve the extent to which feedback is solicited from a wide range of affected families. We can build trust among DPS families, and we'll end up with additional advocates for implementation by getting more creative about the ways that we disseminate information and solicit feedback. Finally, I want to acknowledge that just like the first time around, making decisions about the secondary plan will at times be incredibly challenging. We will face a number of competing priorities, all of which as a parent are personal to me. I believe we are united by a desire to avoid unnecessary social disruptions for children, reduce transportation burdens, give children the opportunity to continue on a magnet pathway, and provide more equitable access to resources for children across the district, just to name a few. In weighing these priorities, my approach will be to hear what is proposed by the experts hired by the district, listen to families' needs and preferences, provide information to families about the competing priorities we're grappling with to set realistic expectations. And then, knowing that there will be some disruption, work with this board to make a decision that benefits as many DPS children as possible and that prioritizes those that need the most support. Change tends to be difficult, but that does not mean that it is not the right path.
Thank you. All right, and next we'll pull a topic out. Educator recruitment and retention.
I want to see innovative solutions presented by our staff for educator recruitment and retention. I also want to advocate hand in hand with our professional organizations like the Durham Association of Educators to address the teaching shortage at the state level. Funding from the state will allow us to provide educators the competitive salary and benefits that they deserve and restore our reputation as a state that pays its educators well, rather than being at the bottom of the country. As of yesterday, per the district's employment website, DPS has 46 teaching vacancies just at the elementary level. We must fully staff all of our schools, and to do this, we must provide teachers and other school staff with a competitive salary and benefits. Our district would also greatly benefit from more educators of color, bilingual staff, and male educators. I will support recruitment efforts with this focus. I support the district partnering with local HBCUs in an effort to recruit more educators of color, their commitment to bringing in additional bilingual educators through the dual language programs, and the current IA to Teacher program. I also support full implementation of the recent recommendations from the DPS classified staff salary study. Our students and schools are served by a range of critical staff, from teachers and counselors to instructional assistants, transportation staff, our custodial teams, and many more. After Duke, DPS is the second largest employer in the county. By valuing all of our staff through fair and competitive compensation, we can stabilize our workforce and ensure that more families in Durham earn a living wage.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We appreciate you coming in so much. Gonna go to our next applicant, April Lawson Day. I should also just note for you all, there's a timer that's sitting up here. So the green means you're good. The yellow is 1 minute left and the red will be when your time is up. No worries. Go ahead, Ms. Dawson.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, and the members of the Board of Education. I am April Lawson Day, and I am seeking to join you as a member of the Board of Education. These days, everybody wants to know your why, and it's funny that we have to explain our why for everything that we do, and especially when we seek to do something from our heart and potentially for the good or whole or benefit of others. But when you do something for a stranger, they may ask, why are you doing this for me? Everyone wants to know what drives us to do what we do when we seek to fill a vacancy on the board. the board will always ask, what is your why? So allow me to share a quick story. At one point last year, my youngest had some concerns in her class that affected her belief in herself and ultimately caused her some anguish. Her grades suffered, her mental state was damaged, and our family struggled. And it seemed the more we asked questions, the more we requested support, the worse the situation became. And as parents faced with this situation, we followed the chain of command, we followed the rules and procedures, and to no positive end. So in my parent role, once these rules and procedures were exhausted, I sought out the decision makers. And this required me to step out of my parent role and into the advocate role. And it was at this point that my goal changed from finding a resolution for my student to finding a resolution for students that I did not know, while seeking to smooth the path for their families that might meet the same roadblocks that I met. By becoming a policymaker, I will be the voice for parents and children that are the public in Durham Public Schools, while hopefully smoothing and leveling the path they travel through this thing we call education. Smoothing the path means awareness of inequities, the role they play in our education system, and enacting policies with the goal of balancing these inequities over a reasonable period of time. In my opinion, two of the greatest inequities that exist are the disproportionate application of discipline with respect to children of color, and children with disabilities. Just a few days ago, there was an article that spoke of the fact that young Black girls were 4 times more likely to be suspended from school than their counterparts. And the article explained that Black girls are being adultified, which means they're disproportionately perceived as less innocent, needing less nurturing, less protection, less support, and also perceived as being more adult-like than their peers. Disabilities are as varied as the children that have them. Surely all education systems struggle with balancing discipline and disabilities. From personal experience, both as a classroom participant and a parent, I have found that children who assimilate well enough to participate in the mainstream class setting are often unfairly disciplined. It is the very nature of their disability as well as their ability to fit in, which creates an illusion that they're like everyone else. My daughter checks these boxes. She's a young Black girl who's with a disability who assimilates well. However, the social aspects of school are particularly difficult for her to navigate. And at times, her classmates have misunderstood her, bullied her. The teachers and administrators, counselors have been of little help and often don't validate her experiences or her complaints. But instead, the focus is on imposing discipline rather than providing support. And at the end of the day, she became aware that if she stood up for herself, she would be more harshly disciplined than her counterparts and certainly the kids that might have bullied her. But at any rate, only after we went up the chain and back down did we see any significant changes. And this is when I realized the change was needed and necessary, and that I wanted to be a part of that change. And as a member of this board, I will work with the departments and committees that research and collect data and seek solutions to address these inequities. Through my work in the community, I will share organic findings and observations with the board to make sure that proposals and policies are rooted in real-time research as well as statistical data. All students deserve protection, nurturing, and equity. Equity may not look the same to all of us, but it certainly is my guess that it will feel the same to all of us. The members of this board occupy a dichotomous position. On one side, they represent the members of the community, while on the other side, they represent the school system. And this dichotomy extends to the staff, teachers, and administrators of the school system. As a result, the voices of parents and students, both marginalized and non-marginalized, tend to go unheard. I share a certain kinship with marginalized voices, as throughout the course of my life as an African-American woman, I too have felt marginalized. And because of that, I've learned to speak for myself and others. So naturally, I believe it's my obligation to be the voice of school-age children of color, parents of exceptional children, parents of colors and of color, and LGBTQIA+ parents, students, and educators. Whether a member of this board or not, I feel obligated to be a voice for others that is heard, understood, respected, and considered during the policymaking process, while at the same time respecting that process. Oftentimes, we find that people from marginalized communities do not share information because they do not believe their comments will be respected or considered. And as a member of this board, I will continue to engage in conversations with community organizations and citizens in an effort to dismantle barriers to shared input from these communities. We have to ask if the board is doing a good job of seeking input and demonstrating use of that input through policy change. If not, we must level up on engagement by inviting and welcoming these voices to a safe space where they can comfortably share input without fear of judgment or further marginalization. Our public schools should be a safe place. Schools used to be a shelter from the storm, a meeting place, a community hub, and certainly that has changed over the past several years. And safety requires awareness of dangers and threats, a plan to address them, implementation of the plan, and evaluation to measure the efficacy of the plan as implemented. Dangers do look different these days. There are daily threats of staff shortages, classroom size, poverty, threats of school closures, and compromised health and well-being of students and teachers. Then there are the more prevalent threats of internet and social media dangers, experienced microaggressions, bullying, mental health concerns, and violence against the school population, both internal and external, from internal and external sources. What plans do we have to make sure our students or our children are safe on a daily basis? Plans should be proactive in nature, yet reasonable in application. Mental health is a critical concern and a real threat to our school safety. Addressing the mental health of our school-age population is especially evasive. And in recent months, I've offered to local and state policymakers this suggestion to address mental health concerns. Our students are tested regularly to chart their academic progress. Suppose students were regularly evaluated to chart their mental health status. Educators and resource staff would then have the data and tools to more fully meet the needs of the whole child. The board's two charges are setting policies and evaluating the superintendent. And in doing so, there are several metrics used when evaluating the performance of the superintendent. In my opinion, strategic leadership, cultural leadership, and managerial leadership are the three most critical evaluation metrics. Strategic leadership requires the superintendent to continually reimagine the vision for the district while keeping the community connected and focused on the core values and beliefs that about the future goals for the district. The status quo must be challenged regularly, feedback must be scrubbed, and new ways of completing tasks must be considered. There must be a climate of change, inquiry, and evolution that supports and seeks the end game. The superintendent must be strong in strategy to create and sustain positive and productive culture. Cultural leadership requires the superintendent to demonstrate understanding of the people in the community and maintain a connection with the community and its traditions. I'm going to skip on over to managerial leadership, which ties everything together. And at the end of the day, the superintendent must have executive level managerial skills. I think they may call it C-suite level skills, but at any rate, every CEO must have these skills. And as the CEO of the district, the superintendent must ensure that all processes and systems align appropriately and work effectively. And as I close, I want to circle back to my why. Many famous people have said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I'm doing this because I see that change is upon us. And I wish to contribute my skills to effectuate that change. I understand the school district is first a business. There are many areas in this business of education that must align in order for the board to provide the best education opportunity for our students. I understand that the school board is about more than just policy advancement. My legal education, government experience, and parental experience have prepared me to take on this task, and my two little hearts at home drive me to take this task. My why has now become why not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take a breath.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Squeeze
It's a lot
all
to get in.
Yes.
So
Okay.
when you're ready, you have 2 minutes to talk about the topic that you're passionate about, and then we'll take another.
Okay. So I believe with educator recruitment and retention, we definitely want to recruit and retain people who are passionate about teaching and launching our next generation of leaders. Recruitment of qualified candidates calls for compensation and benefits that are attractive and competitive, not only for the permanent educators, our base educators, but also for our part-time and substitute educators and staff. And elevating compensation for this group may increase retention. It may also, I also feel that if there are some other levels of training for substitutes or part-time people, that will also help fill some of our gaps in education as in the educators and allow us to retain more educators.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we're gonna pick one. Dr. DeYoung. Right, student boundary planning, secondary growing together.
Okay. So with the secondary growing together, Durham and its neighboring communities are experiencing significant growth. And I do believe it makes sense to adjust the school assignment boundaries to address these needs. I think the Growing Together plan will work well over a period of time. And if they expand it onto the next level of to the higher, high school area, I think that will be beneficial as well, because we do have some overcrowding, some undercrowding, some sorry, it's escaping me, but with your budgets and with the, with the funding and such, that's unbalanced and needs to be balanced a little bit better. So my apologies for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Next, we'll have Kevin Primus.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to respond to the questions and issues outlined in this interview process. And before we dive in, I'd like to introduce myself to the residents of Durham who may be viewing and reintroduce myself to each of you. My name is Kevin Primus. I am a 49-year-old father of 5 children. All 5 children have been fortunate to have participated in the Montessori program, the Montessori Magnet program here in Durham Public Schools. My 3 oldest students have all participated in the Project Lead the Way pathway at Riverside High School. That's an engineering pathway, and I was able to serve on the school improvement team there for several years at Riverside High School. And my pronouns are he and him. My older brother and I are both products of a K-12 public education. My mother, aunts, and many cousins have served their communities as public school teachers, administrators, assistant superintendents in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and California. And these family members were all an inspiration for me when I obtained my lateral entry teaching license about 17 years ago and began teaching in Wake County Public Schools. As a senior in high school, I served as one of 2 student school board representatives participating in all aspects of the school board in Penn Hills School District outside of closed sessions. They didn't allow the students to participate in closed sessions. We interacted with our superintendent and other elected school board members on a regular basis and had the opportunity to speak at every school board meeting. As student school board members, we reviewed and offered input on district programs and the superintendent's budget, as well as his job performance. So it is as a DPS parent, a former classroom educator, and a former student school board member that I approached this opportunity to respond to the prompts provided for this board vacancy interview. The first question asks, what are the 3 most important metrics for me in evaluating the performance of our superintendent and by proxy, their staff? For me, the 3 most important metrics are all tied to the effective execution of the Growing Together plan. And they involve number 1, community engagement, number 2, educator recruitment, and number 3, trauma-informed training. First, community engagement. I'm confident the superintendent and his staff are developing a strategy for community engagement for our Growing Together redistricting plan. There's a website, there's a frequently asked questions. We're familiar with that. I hope the superintendent will actively involve each member of this board in that plan. All 6 current board members were duly elected to have a constituency and critically important relationships with community-based organizations, which will be essential in informing the public. We can't expect everyone to go to the website. The public will have questions. It will be important to catalog questions as they arise, not just post responses, but also provide easy access to frequently and infrequently asked questions in ways that the public can discover and understand and digest. I would be more than willing to facilitate a podcast series, that would feature conversations with the superintendent, his staff, our board members and community members who are investing their lives into the diversity of communities that are served by DPS. And I see this as a podcast series that would be ongoing throughout the whole process, because still people aren't going to know to find it. And once they do, if it's catalog tags, chapters are put in there, people can find answers and send those things to other people so that we can find things. Everyone doesn't read. Some people would like to listen. Well thought out and agreed upon measures for community engagement are vital because our time window is limited. This must be a dialogue, and our district must be responsive to real-time data if we are to live up to the promise of growing together. Educator recruitment. Like districts across the country, DPS faces a crisis in educator recruitment, specifically in the areas of exceptional children, bilingual, male identifying, and educators of color. Like many others, we are not where our families need us to be. As board members, we can support the superintendent and their staff in the execution of a plan, even in the development of a plan if we are invited. Yet it is the responsibility of the superintendent to let us know what the staff needs from us to execute their plan in light of the challenges we face. We're aware of the teacher shortages, especially in EC and language access. These are big issues. Growing together requires, beyond the challenges we already face, the recruitment, training, and retention of scores of classroom teachers to implement the expansion of dual language programs across each region. Working with Dr. Mubenga to develop, support, and evaluate these recruitment efforts will also require real-time metrics to ensure we can launch this redistricting plan successfully and continue to live up to its promise. Thirdly, trauma-informed training. I think that we need metrics to help our superintendent to make sure we're meeting these needs. While much policy over recent decades has centered on the so-called achievement gap or opportunity gap, I submit that what we have failed to wrestle with adequately is the engagement gap. And what do I mean by the engagement gap? Each school year, each educator has an opportunity to engage with each student. How deep is that engagement? How meaningful is that engagement? An honest answer might be it depends. It depends on how well both educator and student are prepared for that engagement and the willingness and sense of trust and safety that each brings to the dialogue. It is not just our students who are dealing with toxic stress on a regular basis. Our teachers, our administrators, our staff, our parents, our families, even our counselors and social workers may be managing effects of domestic violence, family neglect, interpartner violence, narcissistic abuse, complex PTSD. To what extent are our educators and families prepared to handle the dynamics of interactions that are embedded in these realities? If we want to see the educational outcomes alluded to in our mission to ignite limitless possibilities, it is vital that we grow together as a community in understanding, embracing, and overcoming the myriad struggles that students, families, and educators bring to each school-based interaction. Without a strategy and metrics to evaluate our progress towards becoming a trauma-informed school community, we are left with worn out behind-the-scenes narratives of educators blaming parents, parents blaming schools, students underperforming, and justifying their systematic defunding of public education by the state of North Carolina and downward spiraling cycles that exacerbate existing inequities. So I feel that we need metrics in all three of these areas. And without these metrics, we see these glaring inequities. So the second question, where do we see some of the most glaring inequities that result from the engagement gap? I would say exceptional children versus mainstream students, English language learners versus English language natives, and students of color versus white students. If we look at the data, we see the data, we know the data bear this out. I like to quote W. Edwards Deming, who is known as the prophet of quality. And he would say, you can't test quality into a product. Quality is the problem of top management and it can't be delegated. So testing is not going to solve the problem of the achievement gap. I think it has to be a real understanding of this engagement that is lacking and continually needs to be developed. And we need to have metrics to help our superintendent to engage that engagement gap directly. So how would I use my seat on the board? Should I be appointed to address these inequities? I would push for our district to discover whom we can partner with to solve these problems. We have not solved them in-house. Our current exceptional children and English learner families, for example, do not have time for us to simply gather data and apply strategies that have yet to bear fruit. We need to discover a consulting partner who has demonstrated success in recruiting and training exceptional children and English learner staff and hire them because time is of the essence. Families can't wait for us to figure this out over time. Their kids are in school right now, and we need to find help and access to people who already know how to do this in other districts to bring us along a lot faster. We need to address any and every aspect of school culture that does not facilitate an environment where exceptional children and English language students and families feel welcomed and supported. This needs to be a matter of policy and practice, where we dig down into school climate surveys and invite families to share their concerns and experiences without concern for future alienation or retaliation. We need to provide a higher level of training, support, and accountability for all of our head principals to assess their own school climate, teacher recruitment and training, and parent engagement practices. If we can't partner with families, we won't get the best out of our students. We must establish more effective pathways and higher educational partnerships with Durham Tech and North Carolina Central University specifically. Relationships with these schools and other regional HBCUs and emerging Hispanic serving institutions must become true, mutually committed partnerships if we are to recruit and train the educators at the level we need and deserve. I would actively support the superintendent staff in developing and maintaining these challenges. For questions 3 and 4, I'll be very brief. I'd like to deal with them together, and then I'll follow up with actually this in my next question. I think these two things are inextricably linked: engaging marginalized communities and supporting safe and inclusive schools. For me, school safety means that our educators and administrators strive to know each student that walks through the doors of our schools in a meaningful way on a daily basis. When our educators are supported to know, understand, and care for our students first, we will be better positioned to create school cultures where safety and inclusion are expected and felt, regardless of student achievement or identity. We must provide systematic ways to elicit input from all marginalized communities on an ongoing basis. We must also have an effective ground game. We can't just look to digital ways to reach people. We have to actually be in the communities. I'll do the rest in my next question.
All right, thank you. The next part is where you get to address one of the topics that you're interested in. And so let us know which one you want to address.
So I think I'll start with school safety. And let me see, where did I put that? I will start with, actually, that's not one. Here we go. I will start with student boundary planning and secondary growth. I want to include some of these issues with this. So as an educator, as a former coach, athletic director, and I also worked with academic games, with math counts at the middle school level. I was the founder of the math counts chapter for Durham and Orange counties, and also worked with First Robotics. The secondary school plan, I'm less concerned about where the boundaries lie, because I feel like we have good people working on this. I'm more concerned with what happens with the relationships between our middle school students and our high school students, with our middle schools and our high schools, with our feeder schools, and how those relationships are developed and supported. In working on the school improvement team and talking with our teachers at Riverside High, for example, we don't know what sort of math students we're getting. They come from all different places. They show up, they're not prepared. It's really hard as a classroom teacher to deal with kids that have a wide array of learning gaps. There needs to be collaboration between high school teachers and middle school teachers, math department chairs, English department chairs, social science and social studies department chairs, and the middle school teachers to create professional learning communities that go beyond just the high school and just beyond the middle school, but to where we're doing longitudinal understanding of not just what's going on cross-sectionally with our students, but what's going on relationally. How did Johnny or Javier or whoever, how did they make it from step to step in math? Where are they? And how is that data passed along to the next teacher? We do the same thing with sports, with arts, and with academic games. Students need a place for belonging and a bridge from middle school to high school. And this will affect our student safety. This will affect our sense of belonging. This will affect what happens within our school district. When students are coming into middle school, finding a place, whether it's through sports, arts, whatever, and they're able to take that bridge to high school, that needs to be at the central, for me, the central point of what's going on with our secondary school plan. If those things aren't in place, the boundaries won't matter. If we don't have pathways from middle school to high school where students feel they belong, the boundaries won't matter. I trust that our consultants and our superintendent are already working on the boundaries themselves, but the feeder school system needs to be developed.
Thank you. We'll have your next topic. Educator recruitment and retention.
Never heard that one before. So just give me 1 second. I should have used a stapler. Thank you for not starting my 2 minutes yet. You guys are very kind. Here we go, last page. Educator recruitment and retention. I think it's really important. I alluded to this earlier. We need really effective pathways between our high schools, Durham Tech, North Carolina Central in particular. These are institutions that are deeply embedded in Durham and that have relationships with our students who are Black and Hispanic in particular. We need to develop relationships with other HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions, especially since Durham is now, as we know, 1/3 Hispanic, right? We need a comprehensive recruitment effort. We need to train current staff as well, not just recruit new staff. We need to offer opportunities for people to become increasingly bilingual as staff and incentive pay to facilitate that. We need mental health support, specifically for counselors. We were at a certain point where we had 0 Spanish-speaking counselors. I don't know where we are today, but there's a real need if we're going to recruit educators, not just classroom teachers, but also counselors. I've worked with some folks at NCCU who are very willing to work with us on developing a counselor training program. I've met with JB Buxton, the president of Durham Tech, to talk about what they have to offer and their interest in supporting us. Dr. Mubenga is already obviously in collaboration with him. But we also need to recruit specifically teachers for exceptional children, and we need to have education for parents about exceptional children. Dwayne Ballard is a local kind of expert on autism and Black parents, especially Black fathers. Through my relationship with him, I took a course on autism and diversity in the workplace put on by the University of British Columbia online. And we need to help our educators to understand that every child that's in this building has the opportunity to become self-sufficient, independent to some way, in some degree. We have many employers locally who are willing to do so, to help us with that. And so we need to be recruiting and training teachers in these places, also dual language immersion, and also LGBTQIA+
That's your time.
educators. And that's my time.
That's your time. Thank you so much, Mr. Primer.
Thank you.
I think our last applicant is on the way, so we're gonna take about a 5-minute recess and then we'll come back. All right, we're back from our brief break. Jessica, how do you pronounce your last name? Friedlander, if you can join us at the podium here. So you have 10 minutes to address the first question, 4 questions here. Feel
Okay.
free to speak to them in whatever way feels good with you. The little thing sitting on your podium is a timer. And so the green light, you'll be good. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left. And when the red light comes on, your time will end. This that's the first part. The second part of your interview, there's a couple of topics down here at the bottom. And we'll ask you to speak to one of your choosing. And then we've got a bowl here that has topics on it. We'll choose one at random to hear your thoughts on that. Last but not least, Ms. Chavez, our vice chair, is joining us virtually. Ms. Chavez, you want to say hello?
Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
I'm somewhere on some screen, but hello. Thank you for joining us this evening.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just a little.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming and having an opportunity, one, for applying for this seat, as well as having an opportunity to speak with us tonight. All right, we'll let you take it away.
All right. So do I press it or it's going to go on its own? Oh, it's going. Okay. So one of the things that I think I'd like to speak to first that really is probably one of the most important things to me as having worked in Durham Public Schools is the commitment and focus on equity. And that aligns with, in my mind, what it means to be a safe and inclusive environment. And so I just wrote down a few things here. So if you don't mind, while I'm just checking my notes every once in a while. When I think of some of the greatest inequities that I've observed, so I taught at Riverside High School for 9 years. And I've also been at a couple other schools. And so a few things that just immediately come to mind are our referral and suspension rates are dramatically out of proportion. Another thing when we think about inequities in Durham Public Schools is the population in Durham does not necessarily represent the students in our schools. We are last I checked, it was over 95% Black and Brown student population. And I spoke to in some writing, I think to somebody about something about the impact of charter schools and things like that. And so I think those are part of inequity. Another thing is I immediately think about sorry, it's hard for me to still be out of that mindset. Our EC and ESL students not always receiving the same services. And particularly if you're dual identified, it is almost impossible to get services. I struggled with that a lot as a teacher. It's just very challenging. And then one of my personal projects that I worked on, I guess you could say, was our enrollment of historically marginalized students in our honors and advanced courses. I had the opportunity to be the advanced academics coordinator for Riverside for 1 year, and that was a long push of things that I cared very deeply about. And so when I think about how I would address those, I think one of the things that is most important to just be really upfront about is the way that I lead is through facilitation. I am not someone who's going to come here and say, I have an answer to all of these problems and here's my solution. That's not anything that I would ever do. Of course, I have ideas, but particularly when it comes to some of the different inequities, I recognize that I am a middle-class white lady standing up here. And so therefore, it is not my place to solve these problems per se, but to speak for people who have these problems and elevate their voices. In my experience at Riverside, I did a lot of that. I led different community conversations, particularly with different teachers and people in the building to come up with solutions. And so I think when you think holistically about Durham Public Schools, the Board of Education has the opportunity to speak with all stakeholders. So we're talking about the parents and the families, and we're talking about the students and the teachers, as well as principals and other staff. And so for me, that partially relates to school safety and inclusivity. When I think about what school safety means to me, I immediately think about there's different aspects of safety, right? And I immediately know that everyone thinks about probably physical safety first, and that is obviously very important. But one of the most prevalent things that I think we're dealing with right now as a nation is mental health and social emotional safety. And I don't think we have, as a nation, addressed this incredibly well. And I think one of the experiences that I have that would serve me very well on the board would be that I was in the classroom during the transition to online and back into the classroom. And I know exactly what it was like to experience all of that, both as an educator and then also being in online classes at the time, and some of the struggles that I've seen the students experiencing. And so just that little bit of knowledge, I would really love to advocate for a lot more of our mental health services, Wellness Wednesday, really pushing an SEL focus in our schools. That means like retraining, that means focusing on I feel like we came back from the pandemic and the school system in general was like, okay, we're behind. So now let's get caught up. And teachers need to double down on content, and you need to like make sure that kids are coming to study hall, and like that did not serve anybody well. The students were stressed out. We didn't have breaks anymore. No one acknowledged the transition that we're having of everything that happened to all the students who had lost a year and a half of their social lives, of their experiences. And I think we just need to acknowledge that and find more and better creative ways to work on that. And so just some of the simple mental health service experiences that I had at Riverside, there was a group facilitated by our counselor and some teachers called Spark or Sparkle. And it was for, was it Sparkle? Anyways, just creating environments for students to be supported by the people in their building and supporting those efforts, and then finding out, because I know people in the district are already doing great things, right? And so that's why I don't come in and say I have all the answers. All the answers I have are actually mostly things I've observed other people doing and have implemented. And so thinking about what are our educators and parents and students already doing at schools that are working, and how can we expand that and work with them to find other ways to support those endeavors at the other schools. This kind of just ties right in. Oh, I don't want to miss. I think one thing I think about also with safety is actually academic safety. And this sounds kind of weird, but the safety to try things and fail, and the safety to have a safe environment to do those kinds of things. And that is a big classroom culture, school culture. It goes against kind of our societal culture of straight A's and a 4.0 and pushing kids and stuff like that. And so there is a lot of work that teachers are already doing on the ground to do this. I know in my experience at Riverside and having gone into middle school classrooms and other schools in the district, teachers are doing this. I have friends who are doing this, right? And so I think just finding that and fostering that and supporting that and ensuring that we make those things really supportive. And then last, when it comes to safety, I know a topic that has come up a lot is physical safety. And one thing in particular that I think a lot about is the reassessing of if we should have SROs in the school building. And then if we don't, which I think from my understanding of the nominal research that Riverside has started doing, students did feel uncomfortable with that. And so then the question is, how do we ensure safety when a fight does break out? Right. And so I'm not saying that then SROs are the solution, like I'm not for that. And also there are some safety aspects of when altercations do occur or things like that. And so what are some really creative solutions we can do, and what do other districts do, and how do we solve some of these problems to ensure that there is more safety for everybody in the building? Along that line, one thing that I've seen done at the elementary school level. So I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home. So I'm really deep in the weeds of preschool stuff right now. And one thing that I've seen a lot of is just a truly rich, like not just restorative practices. I know that's a buzzword, and I know we've implemented it to some varying degree in the schools. And I would argue maybe not with the most fidelity. But truly teaching and beginning in the elementary school levels, this would change some of our referrals and things like that, is really working on how do we teach kids to manage their emotions and practice that with them, right? And the whole conversation goes around and around about whose job is this? Is this the schools? Is the parents? Is it whatever? They're spending most of their time in the schools. I think the school does have a responsibility, and you have, 25, 30 kids together. They're going to have like disagreements about whose marker that is, right? And so just teaching them how to manage that. And my daughter is already doing like body calming things, and they encourage you when you're feeling overwhelmed to just speak up about it and take a space. And some of those things, I know that's really basic. Again, she's 4, but I think sometimes encouraging some of that and some of those practices, by the time they get to high school, I've seen where kids they feel unsafe, they feel stressed out, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to calm down, and it escalates either to maybe not physical altercation, but something that is not what they wanted. And so just kind of, wrapping up, shoot. Sorry, I'm just so chatty. So one of the things that I definitely want to speak to is the representing marginalized voices. And so one of the things that I've worked really hard on over the years in my various roles is reaching out to people and communities. And so I think using the things we have like social media and then using the schools as a base and finding a way to get in better contact and communication. Again, people who work with these particular students have ways to get in contact. ESL teachers frequently have the contact information and have no problem getting in touch with those students, even if their other regular ed teachers can't. And so I think sometimes we need to acknowledge that people are in contact with these communities and do have a pulse on that. And it might not just be everyone. And so ensuring that we're finding out who is in contact with these families and how can we make sure that their voices are heard. For me, I think another part of that is also really important relationship building. And the community needs to buy in. And so there has to be some groundwork on community building and trust that this is not just another time I'm filling out a survey and then nothing is going to be done about that. I always got the most honest answers to anything I was asking students or whatever, once they felt like they knew me and could trust me. So I think that's incredibly important. And as if I was selected to be on the board, I would work really hard to try to be visible in ways and work with the board and find ways to create deep and meaningful connections in the district that I live in, which is not where I taught anymore. So that's it.
Thank
Sorry.
you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Whew. A lot of questions for a short period of time.
Absolutely. So the next part, we're going to ask you have 2 minutes to address one of the topics below, and then you have 2 minutes to address the topic of your choosing, and then we'll pick one as well at random.
Okay. 2 minutes is gonna, okay. So sorry, I have, like I said, I apologize. This is all being on the fly, which is, just a little bit less organized. Okay, a couple of these. Okay, well, I just pick one and then you guys are gonna pick one for me. Okay. Okay, well, either educator recruitment or student workforce development. Do you guys have a preference on what you want to hear? No.
It is your choice. Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk about student workforce development. Why not? No.
There's no need to apologize. Go for it.
So when I think about student workforce development, one thing that I remember, several students were involved in initiatives in the community when I taught. Of course, I don't know the name of them right now, but there were different initiatives to try to do like skill building and things like that. And I remember distinctly thinking about, so I grew up in Minnesota and I worked in Minneapolis for a while. And the headquarters of Best Buy is in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and I worked as a barista there. Long story short, they have a program where the Best Buy partnered with the high schools, and there were internship opportunities where students got and for like a semester, it was their course where they go and do work and things like that. We have Google, Amazon, we have all sorts of big tech companies coming here. My husband works in Raleigh. We have so much construction exploding all the levels. He is a project manager for pre-construction, and they are desperately searching for people constantly to fill these jobs. This area of the country is exploding, and we are not always preparing our students for that world. We spend a lot of our emphasis on particularly just college prep, but it's just get to college. It doesn't really matter which college, and it doesn't matter if you realize what your focus is. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to look at local, either very local mom and pop places. We have tons of really great locally run organizations in Durham that I know support all sorts of our public schools and all sorts of different initiatives. And so when I think about student workforce development, just really reaching out and kind of rethinking some of the opportunities that we are so lucky to have here in RDU. I know the engineering program at Riverside did a really great job with things like that, and modeling that within the different programs that we have at our high schools, and even thinking about middle school. Yeah, I'm just going to stop.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to pick one more topic for you. Educator recruitment and retention.
Well, that's funny. Okay. Well, Okay, can I have just like 1 second to collect and transition my brain? Ready when you guys are. Okay, so regarding educator recruitment, I think it's really important to think there's a couple different aspects in this, particularly in this time where we are facing an educator exodus versus a recruitment. So 9 years ago, when I was applying for jobs, it was iffy if I was going to get one as a social studies teacher. And now I can walk into pretty much every high school in DPS and there will be a position open for my job. Some of the reasons, as someone who has recently left the classroom, I am part of this exodus and I can speak really clearly to some of the reasons I chose to leave. Some of them are very personal, but some of them are related to finances and things like that with multiple children and childcare costs. Also, you have like issues with parental leave and things like that. And then coming out of the pandemic, the stress and the added burnout that you're experiencing. And so I think one thing to think about is how we're avoiding some of that burnout. And I have like multiple ideas about that. But another thing with obviously recruitment and retention is going to be pay and cost, because the cost of living in Durham is going up exponentially. And currently, I don't think the base salary, if you're an educator, you can afford to buy a home, which is a little ridiculous. Within the city limits of Durham, it'd be pretty hard to get a home. The other thing is building connections with some of the really great schools that we have. We have some of the best HBCUs in the nation right here in our backyard. And then we also have other excellent universities. We have some excellent teacher prep programs across the state. And so connecting with them and building opportunities for people to be a part of Durham Public Schools and then feel invested in our public school system. So as far as recruitment, I think there's a lot of, again, we just are very lucky to have a plethora of places to recruit people from. And then with the retention, I just think some of the initiatives that we need to have are focused on satisfaction with the job. And so that could be financial, that could be mental health balance, that could be, do you feel like you're being listened to and valued? Do you feel like changes are happening that support you? And so that's it.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming in and speaking with us.
Yeah.
Have a seat.
Yeah.
So for all of our applicants, the next step in our process is on March 16th. We have a specially called board meeting. It'll be in this room where we will make a decision on who our next board member will be. So thank you all for coming. Please join us again on the 16th. We'll be right in this space at 5:30. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all. Thank you to the public who joined us. We are adjourned.